Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for today's video, I'm bringing you guys yet another book tag, and this one will be titled the Stephen King book tag. Years ago, there was already a Stephen King book tag, but for this one, I'm gonna make it a little bit different than the previous one, and hopefully I'm not going to be copying anyone else's tag. So I know there's at least one, and there's probably more because Stephen King's pretty popular, but hopefully you guys like my Stephen King book tag. And the questions here are all pretty straightforward, and you don't have to have read any Stephen King to participate in this tag. The only reason it's called the Stephen King book tag is that all of the questions are based on the titles of various Stephen King novels and collections. Okay, enough of the preamble. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So question number one, what is your favorite Stephen King novel? Or if you haven't read any Stephen King yet, what book would you like to start with? And obviously I've read Stephen King. So my favorite Stephen King of all time is The Dead Zone. I won't talk about it too much here. If you want more insight into what I thought about this book, you can watch my finale of my Stephen King ranking video series, where I claim this as my #1 Stephen King book. I go way more in depth into why it's my favorite, and if you're interested, you can go check that out. Question number 2 is Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Name a book that gave you nightmares or kept you up late at night. My cat will not stop meowing. It's okay. Up now. Now you're getting up here. And you're gonna knock down all my books. No, don't. All right, you gotta get out of here, cat. So for me, I typically don't get scared when I read books, and books definitely don't give me nightmares, but probably the creepiest book that I've ever read is The Grip of It by Jacques Jemk. As far as the premise for this book goes, it's pretty straightforward. It's your typical haunted house story. A husband and wife buy a new house, they move in, creepy stuff starts happening. That's it, but the way that it's told, it's very, very fever dream-ish, and it's a very short book, but it has like 100 chapters, and it flips back and forth between the husband and the wife. So you're constantly flipping back and forth between perspectives. It's very not confusing, but it puts you in a daze. And you really, the whole time you're reading it, you're not quite sure what's happening, what's real or what's not real, who's telling the truth, who's lying. And just for that structure alone, it makes for a very creepy read. And the actual stuff that happens in here is just very unsettling. Question number 3 is Joyland. Name a book that made you happy or filled with joy. And for me, a book that made me constantly laugh the whole time I was reading it is Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. This book is one of the best fantasy books I've ever read. Not only does it have great characters, does it have great story and plot and action, but just the humor is just oftentimes so stupid and just, it's very funny. It's also very heartwarming. It's a very light fantasy read. It does have some darker moments, but overall, this was just a very fun book that just put a smile on my face the whole time I was reading it. Question number 4, the exact opposite. Misery. Name a book that made you sad or depressed. And for me, a recent read that I was going to say a recent read that I just read. A recent read is Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. This book has a very sad and depressing premise. It's about these two fathers and their sons who were gay were murdered, and they're trying to get revenge on the people who murdered them. It's got a lot of, very important themes and topics going on throughout the entirety of this book, but at the same time, it was just very depressing to get through. But the writing style was very good, very well written, but overall, it's just a very sad book. Question number 5, Cujo, name your favorite animal companion. Probably not Cujo. And for me, probably my favorite animal companions ever is from my favorite fantasy series of all time, and that would be A Song of Ice and Fire, which would be all of the various direwolves. You've got John's direwolf Ghost, you've got Bran's Summer, let's see if I can name all of them. Sansa's is Lady, Arya's is Nymeria, and Rob's is Greywind. So all of the direwolves, they're basically big dogs, right? And they're very loyal to all of the Starks, and yeah. Question number 6 is Dr. Sleep. Name a book that bored you to tears or even made you fall asleep. And this next book definitely did that, and it has a fitting title, which is Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman. I love Haruki Murakami's novels, but his short stories can sometimes be very boring. They can be sometimes hit or miss. And I've read probably like the first 4 or 5 of the short stories in here, and I was so bored. These stories were just so dull and tedious, and I just could not get into them. And I definitely felt like I should be sleeping instead. Question number 7 is The Eyes of the Dragon. Name your favorite book or series that has dragons in it. And we're going back to A Song of Ice and Fire, my favorite series, with the 5th book, Dance with Dragons. This book, and it's interesting because A Song of Ice and Fire does have dragons. The first book, they don't show up until the very end. And then even in the 2nd and 3rd books, they're kind of smaller and they don't really do too much. But in the 5th book here, there's some pivotal scenes involving the dragons. And so I had to include this one in the dragon discussion. And question number 8, 4 Past Midnight. Name a book that you stayed up way too late trying to finish. And for me, I'm going to have to go with one of my all-time favorite books, Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. I read this book off of the recommendation of Jessie May. This is her favorite book of all time. And I jumped into it thinking, it's probably going to take me a while to read this 700-page book. Nope. I read it in 3 days, and there was one night where I literally read probably like 300 pages just in bed, and I kept falling asleep, and then I would wake myself back up and oh, where did I leave off? And so, yeah, I stayed up way too late reading this book, and I'll be doing the same thing in October because I'm going to be rereading this. That will be a lot of fun, but also very time consuming. Question number 9, end of watch. Name your favorite last book in a series. And I'm going to go with a recent series that I just finished this year, Age of Empire, which is book 6 out of 6 in the Legends of the First Empire series by Michael J. Sullivan. I love this series because from book to book to book, you really can't predict what's going to happen next. And from reading book 1 and then flashing all the way forward to reading this book, there's no way in hell I could have predicted anything that would have happened in this book. And this book tied up a lot of loose ends, and it had great character work, great, final conclusions, and it's just a fantastic last book in a series. Question number 10, The Outsider. Name your most unpopular opinion that makes you feel like an outsider. And I have a lot of unpopular opinions when it comes to fantasy, but definitely one of the most unpopular opinions is The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. This is the third and final book in the original Mistborn trilogy, and even though I love Brandon Sanderson, he's my third favorite author, this is definitely my least favorite Cosmere book. It's very overrated in my opinion. And really just the Mistborn trilogy in general. I feel like he has way better books. Stormlight is way better in my opinion. And even his standalones like Elantris and Warbreaker, I think are like right on that level. And don't get me wrong, I love the first book, The Final Empire. The second book is fine, but this third book, the first time I read it, I thought it was like 3 stars, and then I went back and tried to reread it, and I DNF'd it. And I can't get into it because of spoilers, but there's just a lot of different character perspectives that I just did not care for, and very unpopular. And talking about this book does make me feel like an outsider. And question 11 is Rage, which is the first story in the Bachman books here. For Rage, name a book that made you rage quit it or DNF it. And for me, typically when I DNF a book, it's not out of rage. It's more just that I'm not vibing with the book, or it's, I get into it and I'm like, this book is just not for me. And then I'll DNF it. But a book that I had really high expectations for earlier this year that I just DNF'd very quickly was The Last Mrs. Parrish. And this was a book that I heard nothing but great things about. It's supposed to be one of the best thriller books, supposed to have one of the best, twists to it. But I got into it. I only got like 50 pages in, and the dialogue was horrendous. And I couldn't tell if the author was like trying to make a point, because all of the rich people in the book just had such stilted and hollow dialogue. I was like, is she doing this on purpose, or does she just not know how people talk? And I just, I could not get into it because of the dialogue. It could have had the best twist of all time. I'll never know because I'm never going to finish it. And I definitely DNF'd that book out of just pure rage. Question number 12 is different seasons. Name your favorite seasonal reads. And, when I say seasonal, it can be any season. Spring, summer, fall, winter, whatever you like. And since next month is October, spooky season, I guess we're in spooky season now, but really October is true spooky season. I'm going to go with a couple Ray Bradbury books. And there's none really better for October than The October Country, and Halloween Tree. These are going to be 2 books that I'm going to be reading probably every October. Definitely Halloween Tree, and obviously October. I mean, Ray Bradbury is mainly known for his sci-fi stories, but in this one, he gets a bit spooky. And some of the stories are just very, in the seasons of being spooky. If that probably didn't make any sense. But yeah, it definitely fits the season of October. And October isn't a season, Jake. That's a month. I am so smart. I am so smart. SMRT. I mean SMART. Question number 13 is Finders Keepers. And for this one, name your most prized book, or your most rarest book, or your most expensive book. Something like that. And for me, over the years, with George R. R. Martin being my favorite author, and me trying to collect all of his books, a lot of them are out of print, and they're very hard to find in good condition. So I did manage to find most of them. And this book was, I'll get to it. The Songs the Dead Men Sing. It's a very good short story collection. And almost every time I would look for it on any sort of website in good condition or new condition, it'd be well over $100, but I found a guy on eBay who was selling it for $30, and I have not bought a book faster. I was like, done, I'm buying this. And yeah, it's a very good short story collection. It's in very good condition for it being, you know, probably like 40 years old at this point. So yeah. And then another one that I'm glad I bought is this very old and used beat up copy of Songs of Stars and Shadows. I do have a newer, not a newer, but a better copy of this one because it's a little beat up, like the spine is all tore up. But one very cool thing about this, which I just found out recently, is that it's actually signed by George R. R. Martin, which is very cool. So yeah, these two, along with a lot of other various George R. R. Martin books that I owned, are I'm very glad that I found them and kept them. Finders keepers, losers weepers. And question number 13, later, name a book that you keep pushing back on your TBR and that you keep telling yourself you're going to read later. But you never will. You never will. Give up. Don't do it. And for me, I'm going to have to go with The Tower of Fools by Andrei Sapkowski, by the same author who wrote the Witcher series. And I love the Witcher series, and I finished the Witcher series, oh God, was it last year? Or it was, you know, I did finish it, and then when I heard that he was coming out with a new book in a new series, I was very interested in it, and I got it earlier this year. I read probably the first 3 chapters or so, and I was like, this is fine. It's not really keeping my attention, but I'll come back to it later, and I never did. I've been pushing it back and back on my TBR for a while now, and at this point, I just really don't have a lot of interest to finish it. So, will I ever get to it? I will get to it later. And question number 15, Desperation, name a new release that you're desperate to get your hands on. And for me, that would be the sequel to one of my new all-time favorite fantasy books, The Bone Shard Daughter, and the sequel to this, The Bone Shard Emperor, comes out in November. I already pre-ordered it, and I'm anxiously awaiting for it to arrive and to be November already, because this book was fantastic, one of the best fantasy debuts I've ever read, and I just can't wait for the sequel. And I don't know if you can hear my dog, but she is going crazy in there. And for the last question, number 16, very straightforward. Tag your fellow constant readers. And I'm going to tag a few people here. The first person I'm going to tag is Alan from the Library of Alexandria. I know he's read Stephen King in the past. He hasn't really read Stephen King probably in the past few years or so, but I'm also very interested just to see what his answers for these questions will be. So Alan, you are tagged. I'm also going to tag a new friend of mine, Sharon, from the channel Sharon Dwyer. I know she's a big Stephen King fan, and I'm also very interested to see what her answers for these questions will be. So Sharon, you are tagged as well. The third and final person I'm going to tag for this tag is Baron from the new channel Your Brain on Books. He recently put out a video ranking the Dark Tower series, which I thought was very good, and I'm also interested to see what his answers will be for this. So Baron, you are tagged. And for every person that I just tagged, I'll put their information in the description box below. All right, so that is my brand new Stephen King book tag. Please let me know what you guys thought of this book tag and what your what your answers would be for these questions. If I didn't tag you and you do want to film your own tag video, please feel free to do so, and please consider yourself tagged. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a terrific day.